Okay, continue on with our study today in our series on stewardship, and we have been looking at the fact that God owns everything, God owes nothing. All of our lives is a stewardship to us, and we are dependent on the Lord to be wise stewards of that. But we're going to get today, or move today into how this plays out in how we use and manage the financial resources that we have, and in regards to how we use financial resources for the ministry of giving and the blessing of that. I've been blessed growing up in a family where the Bible was read on a regular basis. The gospel was believed by my parents and taught to us, and we were brought to church, and we saw that church was important. It was not it was a strange thing if we were not at church on a Sunday. It was not even a question. That was just the blessing that we grew up with. Spiritual disciplines were taught. And one of those disciplines, along with prayer and Bible reading, was the opportunity to give to the church and to use some of the finances that we would have. And even as a kid, I got a paper route at 12 years old with Sacramento Bee. And my parents taught me, when you get a paycheck and how you set some aside to give to the ministry of the church. And so I'm thankful to have learned that early. I've heard people complain about churches saying, churches, all they do is they just keep harping on money and keep harping on giving and just, I'm thankful that's not the experience that I had. That was not the attitude. That's not how that subject was ever framed. I've heard of other pastors that are fearful to even speak about money at any time for fear of coming across like a carnival barker, right? You've been to the fair, right, where the barkers are out there and they're just, hey, come over here, and like that. That's like what they don't want to be that guy, that pastor who's just like manipulating people and nagging people to give. And so they avoid the subject altogether. But as we'll see in the Bible, as we see the teaching of Scripture, is that giving is to be an act of worship. Giving is to be a response to God. And just as a pastor, just as I want to lead you in worship and how we sing, meaning the songs that are picked and meaning that we evaluate such songs, or maybe various songs that the church has sung for a long time, the church in general, and we're like, actually as we look at those words, we think, what is that talking about? Is that sound theology or not, right? And you have to evaluate that. Or a new song comes out, and it's like, is that good? Does that lead us to truth? And we want to lead people in worship, in music, in attention to the Word. That includes, in leading people in worship, of how we view finances and how we use them. And we want this to be included in our acts of worship. And so that brings us to our subject this morning of giving, how we can be good stewards of whatever the Lord has given us, whether it's little or much, that we are good stewards of that. So we're going to spend today and probably, I'm guessing next week as well too, when I think of the thickness of my notes here and what the time is we're going to spend a couple weeks here probably looking at is related to giving, of why we give, what we give, where we give, and how Christians should be giving. Okay? And so today we're going to look at kind of the why behind giving. And what should be our motivation. Because this is the key. Two people may go through actions that look very similar on the outside, but why they do what they do that is what is seen by the Lord, right? And we want to think rightly about this. So we don't just do the right thing, but we do the right thing motivated by the right reason. And so that is what motivates us for our giving. Okay? Any questions up front you guys are afraid I'm going to deal with or not deal with? So, okay, then let's look at the why here. Why should we give? I've got a number of reasons for us. One is this. You can write down. Giving shows us how great God is. It's a reflection of who God is and our understanding of God. That's the foremost reason. Moses said in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 26, remember Hebrews 11 is this hall of faith that's going through all of these people that walk by faith. And when it hits Moses, the one thing he mentions of him, Moses, who was raised in Pharaoh's household, I mean, he had a privileged lifestyle, and he was, just was to be an administrator, a leader, a ruler in all of Egypt. But it says of Moses that he considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. So when he thought about what it was to follow God's promises, and that even if following those promises led to suffering, that was of more value to him than all that he had at his disposal there in Pharaoh's household, of all the treasures of Egypt, which were a lot, right? And so he was able to see to really just weigh what is of greater value. And that's really when we think of our money, we think of what is of worth in our life. What is it that we treasure that is important to us? And that really is seen in how we think about money, how we think about resources, in comparison to how we think about God. And so why do we give? The simple logic is that we may give up what is valuable because we value someone greater than what is in our pockets. And we say, the Lord is of greatest importance. So it's just kind of in our attitude like Moses had there. But turn over to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Not only do we see that God is of great value as we give motivated by Him, but not only is He of great value, but giving also reflects the character of God, and knowing that God Himself is generous. Why do we want to be generous? Well, because God's important to us, and God Himself is a generous God. Who would read for us 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9? Chapter 8, verse 9.
For to know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, though He was rich for your sake, He became poor, so that by His poverty you might become rich.
Okay, so here we see the actions of Christ, and even when we think of the whole Trinitarian work of providing redemption, we see that the Father, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. Christ willingly going, with the Father, the Son, their will in alignment, the Son going, He came to take on poverty as He was born to a poor family, was raised in this world, everything in comparison to the glories of heaven, and He took on this. Why? For our riches. So we see a great sacrifice, a great giving, a great generosity on the Lord's part, on God's giving. God is a generous God. Generosity is a good thing. Generosity should never be thought of as as, well, just an extra. Generosity is something that characterizes who God is. God is never stingy. God is generous in everything that he has done. In fact, to the utmost degree of sending his very Son and Christ giving of himself. Why? So that we might be enriched. Okay? And so just seeing the character of God in generosity should be a motivator to us in our desire for generosity. Any thoughts or questions on that so far? Looking at who God is and how God acts as a generous, gracious God. Roger?
I like your comment about Moses, because to me the irony of it all is, by the time the plagues were over and Pharaoh chased the Israelites through the Red Sea, he pretty much destroyed his entire economy. So whatever wealth they had, it was crushed by his disobedience to God.
Hey, you know, it's interesting too, Roger, as you bring that up. Remember when the people were going out? They were going out and like the Egyptians were just giving them all of this stuff, right? And so it's like they were going out with with Egypt's riches.
Yep.
And so sometimes we are like tempted to like, I'm going to cling to this. I don't want to give it. We're like, no, have an open hand, trusting the Lord. I mean, it's worth unto the Lord, and let the Lord be the one to enrich you. Not you be the one to cling to what riches that you have. Let the Lord be the one. He can give you much more than you can steal, right? And so it comes from him. So it's the character of God of why we give. And it needs to be our understanding of God. It really, the term theology proper, when you look at a systematic theology book, where it's all divided, where you have different areas of theology. Theologies about Christ, theologies about salvation, theology about sin. Theology proper talks about who God is. And that really drives everything else. That drives, that's why, when I did this series on the Great Commission, that understanding who the triune God, that defines how we go do the Great Commission. And how we understand who God is drives how we think about giving and how we use the resources that we have. And so if you have a high view of your own resources, but a low view of God, you need a real theology lesson, right? You need to understand God is great. Your money is just money, right? But as we understand how God is great, man, and how generous God is, that really transforms how we use what we have. Okay, a third reason. We see that, as we're looking at why to give, it shows how great God is. It shows how generous God is. Number 3, give because giving promotes godliness. As you give, that promotes godliness. Not only in you, but in others as well. That is a ministry which moves you to walk closer, more faithfully with Christ, but others to respond in a way that they better reflect the glory of God. One, and let me hand out some verses here. Can I have someone look up Matthew 6:21? Who will do that for us? Roger, okay. And then let me have someone else do 2 Corinthians 9:12. May still be there. Chase? All right, go ahead. 2 Corinthians 9:12. All right. Do those two for right now. Number 1 of how it encourages godliness is that it helps us keep our priorities straight. Here Jesus, Sermon on the Mount, is teaching. And Roger, go ahead and read Matthew 6:21.
For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Okay, so this goes back to even valuing God. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. How do you know where your treasure is?
The preceding verses, 19 to 20.
Okay, Quinn, what did you say?
The things you care about.
Things you care about, right? the things you give time to, right? The things that you do, the actions that you take, and it's like you begin seeing, oh, that's important to them. They value that. They spend time on that. They spend money on that. They give attention to that. They sacrifice for it. They rearrange their schedule for whatever it is. And where your treasure is, that reveals what's going on in one's heart. And so we think like, well, I want to use the thing, my time, the treasure that I have. I want to use these things, whatever I have that I'm a steward of, that I give it because it honors God, it shows His character, because He is of great importance. And I want my heart to treasure God. I know that that's the right answer, but sometimes I'm not doing that. And so I think like, you know what? I want my life to be disciplined, that I am giving unto the Lord, because I want my heart to be given to the Lord. And I want that to be reflected in that way. God gives every one of us a finite amount of money, right? What does that mean?
Not unlimited.
It's not unlimited, right? You have a certain number, which means it will run out at some point, right? And so all of us have a finite amount. So what do we do with that amount, whatever it is? Well, some of it you're supposed to live on, right? You're supposed to buy your food, right? And you've got to put gas in your car. And that costs more, right? It's harder to put gas in your car now. You've got to, buy clothes. You've got to, whatever. We've got to just live. What else should we be doing with that? So you're buying your daily bread, right?
Providing for those you're responsible for.
Okay, so you're buying their daily bread, right? If they're in their house, they get eat too, right? And so, right, and so we're doing that.
Support God's word.
Okay,
Around the world.
that's part of that we're doing that, and we're going to be talking about that. But that's what we're getting to. But what else? What are other things that you have to do?
Saving.
Okay, saving. That's a right thing to do, right? Proverbs chapter 6. Look at the ant, right? And that's wisdom.
Pay taxes.
Oh, man. Yes, we do have to pay taxes, right? Yeah, but yeah, we do have to pay taxes.
Yeah, those come out of your paycheck right up front.
They do, right? They don't even give you a choice about it usually, right? And so it just happens for most people. So we have to do those things. But then we realize that, okay, there's other things. What do we do with the rest of it? Well, recreation, yeah. That's part of, I think I would put that into part of the living, right? Because, we'll talk about that later, that actually, because sometimes we think like, oh, no, recreation's extra. I mean, no, part of living, exercise and living and thanking God for the things. I mean, you look at Ecclesiastes, and it says all these things under the sun, I mean, we recognize that they come from God. They're rewards in this world. I quoted from Ecclesiastes yesterday at the wedding that I did for my nephew, and it's like, your wife is your reward, right? Enjoy your reward, right? This is God's blessing. We're to enjoy these things. But then after we have all these things, it's like we should give. Giving is something that is to be done. To just hoard it when it's not, it's like hoarding actually works kind of like an acid on your soul. I mean, it's just, it doesn't, because why would hoarding be detrimental to your godliness?
Self-reliance.
Yeah? Is that what you're saying?
You're not putting your faith in God that He's going to provide for you.
Yeah. That is your safety, right? Now, that's not saying that there's reasonable precautions that we take of savings and, setting things aside like this. That's very reasonable. That's part of the wisdom God has given to us. But beyond that, it's like we're not to be hoarders.
Yeah, hoarding is going beyond what you really need for.
Right. So then what do you do with that? Give that away, right? Bless. encouraged. And so that is good for your soul because what it does is it keeps our priorities straight. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It also moves us towards godliness because it promotes godliness by reminding us God owns everything that we have. Roger, are you still in Matthew 6?
Yes?
Okay, read verse 24 for us also.
No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon.
Okay, so we have one master. The question is, who is that master? And it reminds us our priority is God, and God is our master. All that we have is owned by God. And so think about your stuff in that way. Your stuff is actually God's stuff. You're a steward of God's stuff. And with that stuff, you buy your bread, you buy your gas, you go out to dinner, or you take someone else out to dinner, or you do that, and you save and you prepare. And then we give. We do these things. Also, it promotes godliness in you, but it promotes godliness in others as well too. In 2 Corinthians 9:12. Chase, you had that, right? Yeah.
For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God.
Okay, so this ministry of this service, he's talking about giving, it's supplying the needs, but he says one of the benefits that it does, it's overflowing. Many people are thanking God. Many people are seeing like, wow, the Lord provided. The Lord made that happen, right? And as we have given towards things, and we've given towards missionaries, and we think like, oh, God got those people to the field, and God supplied for their need, and people are giving thanks, and they're giving thanks, and others that were praying for them are saying, oh, look, God met that need. And so as we give, the Lord uses that to stir others to see that God is the faithful provider. God is the owner of it all, and God will meet such needs. So why do we give? One, because it reminds us of who God is, and that God is generous. And also, thirdly, because it promotes godliness in our hearts, as well as others by defining our priority and our treasure and bringing thanksgiving. Now, number 4, a fourth reason for why do we give, because giving brings blessing. All right? Giving brings blessing. Now let me hand out a couple more verses here. Luke 6, verse 38. Who will read that for us? Please, okay. Lori, would you do 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7? 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7. Okay, giving brings blessing. So we're going to see this, but then we also need to clarify it because this truth has also been twisted to be used wrongly as well. And so we want to understand this rightly. If we give, we are blessed. And we want to understand what this blessing is. But that because people have misused this motivation, we don't want to just say, oh, no, we shouldn't have anything to do with being motivated by what it brings to us. Okay, Luke 6, verse 38.
Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you.
Okay, so give, it will be given back to you, and then it describes how it's given back, and it's like, it's kind of like some of you when you're packing your suitcase, right? And you're just pushing it down. We're going to get this thing full. And it's like, as the Lord is going to give beyond what you thought. Oh, I didn't know this bag would hold that much, right? And the Lord gives beyond what we're expecting. And so he says, give, it will be given back to you. Also 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7.
Now this I say, he who sows sparingly shall also reap sparingly. and he who sows bountifully shall also reap bountifully. Let each one do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver.
Okay, we'll get to that attitude part later as we see this motivated by cheer, by joy, by a great blessing. But it's like, no, this is what I want to do. And it says the one who does this sparingly, it's like, with the sowing of the seed. If you plant just a couple seeds out there, the best you're going to get is a couple plants or a couple flowers, right? But if you sow bountifully, it's going to bring a bountiful reward. You'll reap bountifully. And there is a reward for giving. Now, what do you think about that idea of being motivated by the blessing you receive in return for what you give? How does that make you, that sound really schmaltzy here, how does it make you feel?
God's blessing?
Yeah, God's blessing.
Yeah, I don't know what that exactly would be, but I'm looking for it.
Yeah. Is it a good thing to be motivated by promises back to you, by blessings back to you, rewards back to you?
Why not?
It's in the Bible.
Yeah. Have you been around anyone who might think it would be a bad motivation?
Yes.
Okay. How might people think that could be, why would they think that would be a bad motivation?
Seems selfish.
Okay, why?
I don't know why.
Okay.
I mean, I feel that way, but I don't know why I feel that way. It just feels like it's all about me.
You do good just for the fact that you get something out of it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That shouldn't be your sole motivation.
Right.
But on the other hand, and with regard to giving, I'm trying to remember where it is, where it says, give expecting nothing in return.
Right.
So you got to balance those two passages.
I think it's often people think of the publican and Pharisee praying, like, look at me doing these good things. And
Sure.
and so that's what people often equate giving is, look at me doing all this giving, I'm going to get good things, people are going to look highly upon me for giving well. And so that's why it's often associated with selfishness and...
Well, and so we sometimes will equate, and I want to bring this up because I want us to be honest about it, of our motivation. And sometimes we'll be like, man, something good is going to happen to me for me doing this. I should be motivated by that. I should be willing to be, and we kind of get this ascetic attitude that we're thinking like, this should actually just, if it's more, the more miserable I am, the more godly I must be, right? And so if I'm getting something good in return, no, I don't want anything good in return. And it's like, well, no, God has ordained this. God has done this. And it's like, and to be motivated not solely by that, Roger, like you're right, there's many motivations in there, but this is a very proper motivation to be like, wait a second, it's a good thing to give, and the blessing that is returned. Think about it relationally. I think like in marriage, and you could you talk to husbands and wives, and maybe it's like, man, we got all this conflict in our family. It's like, well, hey, would you think about maybe speaking kindly to your wife, and maybe if she likes flowers, buying her some flowers, or taking her out to dinner, and maybe there will be a positive response. Well, she should just respond that way anyways, and I shouldn't do something to get something in return. It's like, no, this is just how life works, right? And so we want to understand that God has said, give and sow, and there's a great reward that is in there. So thank the Lord that He motivates us.
Thank God in His Word. You got a good point on your wife thing. It's like with your relationship with your wife. When I do nice things for my wife, I expect a return. I don't know what it's going to be, but I expect a return. It works out pretty good so far.
I'm going to leave that illustration where it is. We're going to get off on it.
Well, you can take...
I know what you mean. But we're going to... Anyways, yeah, Roger.
I like having the attitude of the whole trusting thing, because if you can't outgive God,
yeah,
and God can certainly when you give, you kind of go, well, what if I don't have enough money later on down the road or something?
Yeah.
And you can figure, well, God has the option of either blessing you in response, giving back to you, or giving you an opportunity to be challenged financially in the future and trust Him more at that point. God can do whatever He wants to do.
He can. And the way that God blesses, and here's where it goes wrong, is where we expect that, and this is where like the prosperity gospel comes in, where they say, if you give this financial amount, you will receive back this other financial amount. It's like, that blessing may not come in that form. But you need to understand, it's like, in fact, you may give to where you are impoverished in some way, but yet you're trusting, Lord, you are going to show me what I give was nothing to the way that you supplied and the way that you cared. And so that's why we do not want to follow false teachers like T.D. Jakes and other faith, where they have this miracle faith seed and write him a check and you'll get this more in your bank account. But yet, Scripture does speak about rewards and blessings. And many of those rewards, sometimes those rewards are in physical, financial ways, but mostly that it's a spiritual reward. We look at Ephesians chapter 1. Ephesians chapter 1 talks about all the amazing ways in which we are blessed in our salvation. And for you to say, this is like the pearl of great price, this field, or that had this buried treasure, and man, I went and sold everything I had to buy this field because what I'm getting from that field far surpasses. And so you give unto God, and you trust God is going to richly reward you in His wisdom. So we want to be motivated as we give by understanding who God is. God has priority. God is generous, and so generosity is a good, godly thing. We want to be motivated by a desire for godliness, that we would grow in understanding the priority of God and that He is our treasure and the encouragement of thanksgiving that brings to others. And so those are why we're motivated, and we're also motivated by the blessing that God gives in that. Now,
I think you can throw in relationship too.
How's that, David?
I think that, when you're obedient, when you're supporting, when you're all in, it's a relationship, right? It's just a way to approach it.
Well, and that's what it is. It's one, and that's what we're talking about. It's your relationship with God. That's like they value God. God is their treasure, and I'm related to my brothers and sisters, and they are encouraged by that and move. But motive is everything. Now, has your motive ever been lacking? Has it ever, when you think about coming to church and you think about giving, your motivation is not driven by those things that we've talked about, and you're kind of feeling begrudging about giving, or whether it's at church or whether it's your time in ministry or whatever. What do we do then when our motivation is not of these things that we've spoken about?
Pray God will change your heart.
Okay, because we know what's right. Yeah, Sue?
I think we just do what's right, and sometimes the feelings and the joy comes afterwards.
Okay, but
If it's a discipline in your life, and there's always those ups and down times.
okay. So what does that mean when you're doing what's right, even though the feelings are not there, you're not concentrating on the blessings, you're not concentrating on the godliness, but you're doing what's right anyways. What do we call that?
Isn't that important?
It's obedience, but okay, you guys are talking about it. It's really faith is what that is. And it's like faith is saying, I'm stepping out to go the path that I know I'm supposed to. And I'm not feeling it today, but that's not the point, right? I'm walking by faith. And so sometimes we we say, oh Lord, thank you. You've already convinced me and I'm giving out of the joy of my heart already. But then others, it's like, I know I'm supposed to be motivated by that. I'm not right now, but God, would you change my heart so that I am motivated? But I'm going to follow what you've said to do. And Lord, and then you teach me and strengthen me. Now, David?
I think you really nailed it when you say, well, maybe I'm not feeling it today. I mean, there's been many times over the last 30 years that day I just wasn't feeling it in one area or another. But when I don't feel it, I go back to what the instructions are. Yeah. It's like, we're emotional creatures. We get all kind of goofy from time to time. Now, I'll say this too. Maybe you're at a place where you're like, I'm actually embittered. I'm feeling coerced. I don't want that, and I'm not sure how to do this right. And I may say to you, well, then don't give today, right? Don't give today. The Lord does not need your money, right? God doesn't. God's going to accomplish His work according to His riches and His wisdom. Now, I would encourage you to say, but you could have a part in what God is doing. And so, but I do not want to coerce someone to say, give against your will. I'd say, you know what? Pray, God, would you give me a will that I might be willing to serve you? But no, this church, the gospel in the world is not dependent on you. It's dependent on God. Now, God invites you to have a part in supporting that and joining in that. And that will bring blessing to you. It can bring blessing to others. It reflects His glory in all that He's doing. So it's a great blessing to do that. But we are not going to be those who say, if you don't do this, souls are going to hell. No, God is saving everyone. He is going to save, right? So we are not going to be carnival barkers. But I would encourage you to walk by faith and give, motivated by that which God says is why He wants us to give.
Yeah. One of the, back in verse 7 of 2 Corinthians 9, where it says, let each one do just as he had purposed in his heart. And I think that's where it begins, right there, when it comes to giving.
Yeah.
What is it that you're purposed in your heart to do in regards to what the Lord has commanded you?
Yeah.
And once you settle that in your heart, then it doesn't matter what you feel.
That's right.
You do what you have purposed to do for God.
And we're going to get to that there as far as how we do this and things that we determine. I'm praying, Lord, what would you have me do? What would be that I believe in the resources that I have, that I honor you, and I'm purposing that in my heart, and I'm committing to this. Lord, here we go. But then it says, not grudgingly or under compulsion, right? You know where else? That reminds me of in 1 Peter chapter 5, where it's talking about the ministry of elders, that they're not to serve under compulsion, right? But to do so willingly. So there's an example there of even our ministry in which we do, whatever ministries that they are, we don't motivate, and we're not to be motivated out of guilt, but it is out of grace. What an opportunity to serve the Lord in whatever capacity He puts before me. What an opportunity to honor the Lord in whatever resources He has put before me. And so we honor the Lord in that. Okay? So that's why we give. I'm going to start the question that we'll move into next week further. What should Christians give? All right? We answered the why of giving, but the big question, what do we give? And there's multiple parts of this answer. I'm going to start with just the first subpoint here. What do we give? The answer is everything. Everything. Now let's close in prayer. Everything. Turn to Romans chapter 12. Romans 12. 1. Remember, God owns all. Not just your money, but He owns everything. He owns your opportunities. He owns your talents. He owns everything. But your money is included in that. And if God owns all, He owns all of your money. And Romans 12, speaking of our life based on the mercies of God, the whole gospel that's preached in the first 11 chapters. Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. Present yourselves, your whole being, of all who you are, unto God. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. Remember that? It says, whether you eat or you drink or whatever you do, so he's saying everything, anything, do all to the glory of God. Money is just one piece of this puzzle of everything that is within our lives, that is all to be given to the glory of God. And that includes, so that means everything that you spend is to be done for God. So you may, if you still write paper checks, or however you do it, or however you swipe, or whatever you do like this, every one is to be done for God, right? So if you write out a check to the church, do it unto God. You write out a check, well, you don't write out a check to Amazon, you swipe to Amazon, right? And you put the number in there, or whatever. You do it unto God. Everything honors God. And so as you're trying to manage your finances, and you think like, what is the Lord's? Every bit of it. You think like, okay, what? We need to go get milk. All right. Well, you buy milk and you say, God, thank you for providing milk for the fridge today, right? And we're buying this, trusting you're the provider of it, right? And this is what we need. And what if a husband is married to a wife and she wants to eat out twice a month, like this, and he's like, yeah, but babe, you could cook a potato and we could eat that at home, and it's a whole lot cheaper, right? What should he do?
3 times a month.
That's right. He's like, yeah, but we can eat the potato and then we could give that money to someone else, right? What is done unto God? All of it's to be done unto the Lord, right? And I would say, hey, that's what your wife's asking. If you're able to do it, right? And do it to the glory of God. You can do a lot of things with your money. Whatever you, and it may be that you even, even knowing your own giftedness, like this, of how you do things, you think like, well, I could pay someone money to fix this broken toilet at my house that I don't know how to fix, but he does. And then with that time that I would have spent a lot longer doing, I can spend time in discipleship with this other person. It's just kind of managing your giftedness, your strengths, whatever like this, but I'm using everything that I do is unto the Lord. Everything is the Lord's. And so it's all to be spent for His glory. Which means we don't use it where we say, hey, I've given this portion to the Lord. I can do whatever I want with the rest. And God has no claim on what I'm doing over here. That's spiritual. This is secular. That's the wrong way to think of life, right? Everything is the Lord's. So honor Him in it all. Right? Any questions or comments on that part? All right. We're going to get in now. You think like, okay, but what about tithes and offerings The Old Testament talks about that. New Testament talks about that. Sacrificial giving, special offerings like that. How do we think about that? We are going to talk about that specifically, all right? But just what I wanted to start with this one of how we give is to realize everything you have is the Lord's. And so honor Him with it all. Okay? Any questions? Okay. Yeah.
I guess I have a question. How do you determine excessiveness in spending? Because the Lord gave me that money, so if I decide I want to buy this, then this, and this, and this, and this,
Yeah.
instead of, right, giving it to the guy on the street who doesn't have anything to eat or whatever, giving it to a mission. I don't know. I guess I just always struggle with what's excessive and over the top spending and extravagant.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about that as we talk about what the bottom line is motivation of one's heart, and really is what that is. Each purpose in their heart. There is not like, and as well, just to steal the thunder for next week, there isn't. Well, there has been tithes and percentages and stuff like that. That's not what motivates us. It might be some guidelines for us, but generosity of one's heart is what we want, because that is what best reflects who God is. Mm-hmm. And to know that everything that you have and the good things that you have is just His blessing. It's kind of like people are coming in with soul finches. It's like, think about, you get a plate of food. We went to this wedding rehearsal and we had this plate of food and it was so awesome. I went back for a second plate, and I was telling Lisa later that night, I shouldn't have went back for that second plate. And I'm paying for it now, like this, right? And there was this like, you know what? I should have enjoyed that, and I would have enjoyed that perfectly. But I looked wrongly at it at that time. And it's not necessarily that someone else who went back for a second plate shouldn't have. I'm just saying for me what was motivating my heart at the time.
Right, okay.
All right, we're beyond time, but we're going to hit those questions specifically.
All right.
Close. Father, thank you so much for all that you have given. And you've given so much, Lord. You're very generous. I pray, Father, that we will have a heart that reflects yours. And I thank you for this church and the opportunity we have to gather today, Lord, for corporate worship, and pray that, Lord, you'll bless us together. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.